Welcome back to the channel. Today we have some absolutely crazy wedding style Am I the A-hole stories. First one is Am I the a-hole for wearing a wedding dress at a wedding? Seemed pretty obvious, but maybe we're missing some context here. So, my friend, 20 female, and I, 19 male, have been friends for over a few years, and she recently got engaged. A week ago, I got a DM from her for a small costume party she was hosting as a celebration for her getting engaged. I asked if there was a theme, and she said there wasn't. I'm a cosplayer, so I had a lot of choices. I didn't want to rock up in an anime cosplay, so I thought it would be funny to go to an engagement party as the corpse bride. I arrived at her house yesterday and everything seemed normal. A few people complimented my costume and I was having a lot of fun. After 10 minutes, my friend's fiance walked out in a black tuxedo and announced this was actually their wedding. Apparently, my friend saw a video of someone doing this and wanted to do the same. He asked us all to go to the backyard for the ceremony to begin. I went straight to him. I asked him if I should quickly go home and change my outfit and that I would get back before it started. He told me it was fine since I didn't know this was the wedding. I trusted him and followed everyone outside. They got married and everything seemed good. The reception was just in their house again, so everyone just walked back inside and picked up where they left off. I tried talking to my friend and celebrating with her, but she kept making excuses to not talk to me. I assumed it was just because she was tired from the big day and wanted some alone time. I didn't bother her after that, and the party soon ended. I got home, and half an hour passed when my phone started getting notifications. I checked, and it was my friend texting me. She was cussing me out and telling me how I ruined her wedding. I was really confused and asked what I did. That only made her more angry. She told me it was basic knowledge not to wear a wedding dress to a wedding. I reminded her I had no idea it was a wedding and that I asked her now husband if I should change and he said it was fine. She didn't respond, but I got a text from her husband. He asked why I would tell her he said it was fine. I told him he said it was fine. Then he said how I should have changed anyways and it's my fault that the two are now fighting over this. I tried texting her that I was sorry and if I had known I wouldn't have done it. I woke up today and saw her and her husband have blocked me on everything. So, am I the a-hole for not changing out of this wedding dress when I found out it was actually a wedding? I feel like in any other situation, they absolutely would be the a-hole, but everybody was invited to this event unsuspectingly. That it was just a costume party and a little get together, and that it turned out to be a surprise wedding. Maybe they should have brought a change of clothes just in general, but, like, how can you really blame this person? It was a costume party, and it was for the pre-celebration of a wedding. So, because they're a cosplayer, they thought it would be funny to show up in a wedding dress as the corpse bride. I don't feel like they were the a-hole. They certainly weren't prepared for a surprise wedding to take place, and both of the friends certainly overreacted to this. But let me know what you think in the comments. Next up, we have Am I the a-hole for wearing my wedding ring to my sister's wedding against her wishes and hijacking her night? My sister, 29 female, got married last Saturday. The ceremony was beautiful, and I enjoyed myself as much as someone who is famously not a wedding guy could. The dramatics were not quite as enjoyable. I, 27 male, hadn't seen my family in a few months, and we've only had a handful of phone calls over the course of those months. It's never on purpose that I pull one of these disappearing acts. It's mostly out of habit. I've been fiercely independent for most of my life, and I get easily caught up in whatever I'm doing at the time that makes it hard for me to remember to keep those not in my direct line of sight in the loop. My mother is the same way. It's also nice visiting around times when big events like this are going on, as my mom is prone to hovering whenever I'm home, and this takes some of the spotlight off me. I had been in Ireland around 8 months prior to flying in last Thursday. I was originally there to spend 2 weeks with my best friend, who, thanks to the aforementioned one track mindness I possess, I had unfortunately grown apart from within recent years. Ours was a friendship that I had started since we were 14 and was one of the most important relationships in my life for over a decade, and I wanted to put more effort into it so I didn't lose it. He was spending time overseas as to reconnect with his heritage since his father's passing. I was already traveling, and my stay obviously turned out to be a lot longer than 2 weeks. It also turned into us getting married. Funny how life works out. About 2 weeks before our trip to the States for my sister's wedding, I sent out a mass email to close family letting them know that me and my husband were married. I wanted to assuage any possibility of us stealing any thunder right from the get go. My mother replied that she was hurt that she wasn't told sooner or allowed to be there, which I understood. It seemed her mood flipped by the time we met in person, however. Rehearsal dinner was on Friday, and that was where we all met up for the first time. My mother was overjoyed to see me and my partner and spent a large part of the night telling stories about how she had always predicted there was something different about my friendship with him compared to others I was close with in high school. It was a very sweet moment, but at the end of the night, my sister pulled me aside and asked if we would not wear our wedding rings to her ceremony. I was confused, so I asked why. She said I was taking the attention off her, and she was already bitter that I had hijacked her rehearsal dinner. More family might take notice if I wore my wedding ring tomorrow and cause a similar incident. I refused. Like I mentioned before, the ceremony was beautiful, but she didn't speak to me for the rest of the weekend, and we ended up leaving the reception early. I feel like this is kind of a tough one. Like, she very clearly tried to let the news get out early so that during the special event of her sister, that things wouldn't be so focused on her. It sounds like the OP only got extra attention during the rehearsal dinner and nothing really happened during the ceremony. And I highly doubt that wearing the wedding rings would have really brought that much extra attention to it. But let me know in the comments if you think the OP was the a hole for going against her sister's wishes. Next up, am I the a hole for not apologizing to my friend after she screamed at me and my kid at her wedding? This ought to be interesting. 2 weeks ago, I, 29 female, hubby, 31 male, and son, 4-year old, attended my BFF's female 28 wedding. It was a beautiful ceremony and everything was going great until BFF and her husband cut the cake. Important context: BFF did speak to me during her wedding planning about being unsure on whether or not to allow kids at her wedding. Her two sisters both have kids around son's age, and she sees him as her nephew too. But she wanted to be able to let loose and enjoy her wedding without worrying about any kids messing things up. I gave her my opinion, saying me and hubby allowed kids at our wedding and wouldn't have it any other way. The kids were still family and deserved to be included. After that, and speaking with her sisters, she and her husband okayed kids for the wedding. Now, the ceremony went swimmingly. BFF's nieces sat with me, hubby, and son as her sisters were in the bridal party. I brought quiet activities to keep them entertained, and everybody behaved. I even cried from how lovely it was. When we got to the reception, nieces were returned to their parents, so it was now just me, hubby, and son. Dinner went fine, and then the couple took to the dance floor for their first dance. Afterwards, everybody was welcome to the floor to dance for a bit before cake cutting. At this point, the kids were running around and playing with each other, and it was a fairly secure space, and I knew almost everybody there, so I felt comfortable with son playing with the other kids while hubby and I had fun dancing. Important to mention now, hubby offered to DD so I could enjoy myself. So I had a couple of glasses of wine at this point. BFF had also been drinking and celebrating. BFF and her husband go to do cake cutting, and hubby and I are a little slow getting there, so there was a crowd blocking our view. Suddenly, I hear BFF scream son's name. Hubby and I push forward to see what's wrong. I see my son with frosting around his mouth and on his fingers. The cake had a small chunk taken out of it. I try to apologize, but BFF turns around and yells, "This is your fault. Your son ruined my cake. He's only here because you told me it would be worth it to include the kids." I yelled back, telling her it was just an accident and the rest of the cake was still edible. This was her nephew she was screaming about. She told me I was no friend of hers and he wasn't her nephew in front of everyone. She told me to leave or she'd call security. Son and I were crying at this point, and the three of us left. One of the bride's sisters reached out to me after and apologized for her sister's reaction, but said I needed to apologize. I think sorries are out of the window now after her outburst. I told her sister so and said I expect an apology first before I'd say anything to her. Not only did she blow up at me in front of everyone, but at my son. I'm humiliated, but even more angry on his behalf. So, am I the a hole if I refuse to apologize first? Honestly, weddings are one of those events that you really only get to have once, and it seems like there's always this sort of pressure to make sure everything goes as perfectly as possible. And since her friend was convinced by her that she should allow kids and that it would be totally fine, and then it just so happens that her son was the one that screwed up the cake cutting and messed up the cake, I can see why she would be so upset. Did she react a little bit? Maybe, but I don't think she should necessarily be the first person to apologize. She wasn't convinced that she should allow kids at the wedding party and was convinced by the OP and some other friends and family that it would be fine. And then everything kind of blew up in her face. So I definitely think the OP should apologize first. Let me know what you think in the comments. And finally, am I the a hole for canceling a wedding gift when the wedding was canceled? My husband's sister was supposed to be married in September. I chose an item from the registry, but the exact item she had added had a weird detail. She had explicitly mentioned previously needing option A, but on the registry she accidentally listed option B. So I asked her to make sure I got what she needed, so she knew exactly what I was planning to gift. Sadly, they have now broken up. The gift hadn't shipped yet anyway, so I canceled it. This past week, she reached out to me about it. Since she knew I was purchasing it and we live far away, she was concerned that it had been delivered but someone had stolen it. When I explained that I had canceled it, she was pretty upset. My mother in law has now reached out to us about it and feels that I was unkind to cancel her order. She feels that since my sister in law is clearly going through a difficult time and the holidays are approaching, it would have been more appropriate to let the gift reach her anyway. Obviously, these are unfortunate circumstances, but this was a substantial gift, $700, and pretty well above the threshold of what I'd normally spend for a typical holiday gift. $700 for a gift is really steep, and for a special event like a wedding, I could absolutely understand splurging on something like that, but the wedding got canceled, so I'm not sure why her sister-in-law would be so adamant about still receiving a gift for an event that was canceled. Regardless of whose fault it was, it's one of those things. $700 is not cheap, and if the OP wouldn't normally spend that much money for a holiday gift, I can understand why she would wanna cancel the order. It is unfortunate that things kind of played out the way that they did since she had to ask clarifying questions about the gift, that her sister-in-law knew that she was getting the gift, but again, I don't know why she would still expect to receive the gift if the event got canceled. Let me know what you think in the comments. These stories are absolutely crazy and honestly makes me super grateful that my wedding went super smooth and it was a beautiful day. The story that stuck out for me, I think, was honestly the first one because it's hilarious that the OP decided to wear a wedding dress type cosplay to a costume party and nobody knew that the event was going to turn out to be the actual wedding. And it's surprising to me that their friends didn't have the right kind of sense of humor for something like that. And honestly, when the OP asked the husband to be whether or not they should change out of the wedding dress cosplay, he should have just been honest with them, especially since the OP was convinced that he would be able to come back in time for the ceremony to start in not a cosplay wedding dress. Let me know in the comments which one of these stories you thought was the craziest. And if you have a crazy wedding story, you know I absolutely want to hear it.